Welcome, everyone. We're going to just wait another moment here, let some folks pop in, and then we'll get started with this evening's community conversation with Pastor Holly Strickland. Seeing some faces that we saw very early this morning. Full day. Pastor Holly, if you're ready, let's get rolling. That would be great. Good evening. Welcome to MLK Saratoga's 7th Dr. King Celebration Weekend and the very first community conversation of the weekend, which will be followed a little bit right after. Pastor Holly Strickland is joining us from Elmira, New York for the brilliance of the female spirit in today's activism. Have women been the deciding factor in faith and social activism throughout our country? Pastor Holly has been with Webb Mills United Methodist Church in Pine City since 2017 as their pastor. She sat on a number of boards, including Elmira's NAACP Executive Board. She's also served for quite some time with Able To, which is an important organization doing work for cerebral palsy and handicapped children. And she has been involved in multiple mentoring programs for girls and young women. She's grandmother to 3, mom to 5 adult kids, prolific writer, has been an inspirational speaker here and abroad. And on top of it all, she's a doctoral student at the moment. This is a very busy, dynamic woman, and we so appreciate you being with us. Thank you, Pastor Holly.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I am honored and grateful to have this opportunity to participate in the Saratoga Springs Dr. King Celebration Weekend. It is so exciting to be a part of this conversation with you this evening. And as you know, conversations are uplifting and inspiring. Some conversations can be uncomfortable and messy. Some conversations can remain unspoken and deny the concerns even exist. But regardless of what kind of conversation is held, the conversation is important and necessary in communication. So I invite you to share the next few minutes in conversation with me and with each other. The title of this conversation is The Brilliance of the Female Spirit in Today's Activism. Have women been the deciding factor in faith and social activism throughout our history? Where does one begin a conversation like that with someone? Where does one begin to unpack the vibrant role of women as agents of change? Well, first, to the question, have women been the deciding factor in faith and social activism throughout our history? The answer I put forth is a resounding yes, absolutely. Next question. I know there are some of you in this conversation who need a little more information than just my answer of yes. Some may be thinking, okay, show me. Show me how women have been a deciding factor in faith and social activism throughout history in ways that they have been agents of change. There are many examples of how women have helped to shape history, how women have influenced change. Many of their stories remain untold. Let us go back to earlier times when women were at the forefront of what was happening around them. For example, there are many stories in the Bible that illustrate how women were instrumental in being change agents and making changes for those around them. I first think of Deborah. She was a prophetess, a wife, and a judge. Her story can be found in the book of Judges, where we find that she was the fourth judge during the days before Israel was ruled by kings. She is the only female judge over all of Israel mentioned in the Bible. She would sit under a palm tree and bring judgments to those who needed wisdom, revelation, and discernment. She trusted God and obeyed his commands. Judge Deborah was a busy woman. We are told in Judges 4 that she held court under the palm of Deborah in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites went up to her to have their disputes decided. She was respected because of her faith, her fairness, and her concern for the ill treatment of her people who were suffering from enemies. She was a military leader who helped to win the war when the Canaanites, due to her strong leadership skills. There are women of faith who have shaped the path of this country. Time will not permit me to delve into the many names that deserve to be listed and their stories shared. I will offer a few names, though, with the hope that you will continue these conversations with others. Harriet Tubman. Born a slave on a plantation in Maryland in the early 1820s, Harriet Tubman was called to lead her people out of slavery and north to freedom. Guided by her faith in God, the North Star, and the Underground Railroad system, Harriet was able to lead about 70 people to a changed life. This despite a price on her head and a medical condition that caused her to fall asleep at any time without warning. She also served during the American Civil War as a cook, a nurse, a spy for the Union Army. And she was the first woman to lead an armed expedition at war in Combahee Ferry, where more than 700 slaves were gained and given their freedom. She was an activist in the struggle for women's suffrage. And then there's Mary Jane Mcleod Bethune, an educator who was born in 1875 on a plantation in South Carolina. She was born free in her family because of the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863. But she soon realized that one important difference between Black and white people was that white people could read and become educated, whereas Black people were denied those things. She was instrumental in helping Black people learn to read and gain an education. Her school, now known as Bethune-Cookman College, serves thousands of students from all over the world, with the school motto being, "Enter to learn, depart to serve." Not all women who are agents of change are famous and well-known in the history books. Many dwell among us in our day-to-day lives, in our families, in our communities, and in our churches. Growing up, you may each remember women who made it their business to see that people were treated rightly in the community. They were often vocal and stood up for those whose voices were not being heard. That was the woman who would take you to your meetings, your doctor appointments, and the legal hearings to help you ask the right questions and get what you were entitled to. They served as advocates. They actively became involved and worked to make changes for the better. They may have marched, carried signs, picketed, protested, given letters that they wrote to the editor of newspapers, and gathered people together to protest social wrongs. You may also remember other women or groups of women in your community who helped mothers with childcare needs, preparing meals, and offering advice on how to handle your teenagers. They often shared what they had experienced in their own lives. They told their stories. I remember my own mother who would drive neighbors to the grocery store because our family had a car and they didn't. I remember her buying extra gifts at Christmas time for elderly neighbors and visiting them because they had no family to share the holidays with. Also in families, I'm sure many of you can recall someone in your family who was an example of a strong woman and advocate. It could have been your own mother, grandmother, sister, auntie. But these women used their voices to right the wrongs in the family. She was not afraid to call out if they were not treating someone right. She was the one who would tell it like it is. No holds barred. Half the family would be upset with her, and the other half of the family were in her corner. Think of that family reunion or birthday party or wedding where someone was upset about something and let everyone know it. Often they created change in ways that forced others to pause and take a closer look at what family members were doing and the direction the family was headed. Some women are what we call the rock and the anchor of a family. It may be a relative who acts as a family historian or a matriarch to the generations. In my family, it was my grandmother, whom we called Mumsy, and my godmother, named Aunt Jenny. They were longtime best friends, original BFFs. These women of God were faithful in role models and examples of being godly women. Solid churchgoers, they shared their faith and spirituality with all who came in contact with them. They set an example of treating others with respect, being polite, and helping others when they could. I remember them singing hymns and humming spirituals while they cleaned their homes and cooked meals. I remember them reading their Bibles and praying on their knees. Most of all, I remember their compassion and generosity in giving support to those who were in need. Social justice, politics, activists, those words were not so much spoken as enacted. They raised their children and grandchildren to care for others and to love their neighbors. Their legacy still resounds in my family, even though they have been dead for many decades. Speaking of the words social justice and activism, I think about the politics that are happening even today as we gather here. I think about this Dr. Martin Luther King weekend celebration that is taking place. There are a variety of events that have occurred earlier today that have been inclusive and directed towards social justice and equality. And I hope that you've been able to participate in many of these opportunities to learn more about what is happening in this country and how we can make changes for the better. The idea for this conversation came immediately after I was invited to be a part of this event. The words feminist, womanist, and God came to mind. So I sat with those three words. I pondered what those words meant to me. As an English teacher and educator, I think definitions are important in conversation. It helps to clarify or frame what is being said and better understand what the speaker is saying. Feminism is about change. It involves a wide range of movements in the society that help to define and establish equality of the sexes in those areas that were responsible for and promoted the male point of view and paid little or no attention to stereotypes that were important to women and girls. Feminists and feminist movements have inspired and caused changes in women's rights to vote, to hold public office, to earn equal pay, to own property, and to have equal rights in marriage, just to name a few of those campaigns. There are other areas where feminists have forced change, including the use of gender-neutral language, protection from domestic violence, sexual harassment, and assault. Criticism of feminism has emerged, including only looking at the needs of white, middle-class, educated, heterosexual, or cisgender lens for action. Womanism is also about change. Womanism is a form of feminism used to differentiate between feminism associated with white women and their needs and Black women. Womanism is based on the needs of Black women that come from historical and daily experiences of being a Black woman. Womanism is a focus on the contributions and abilities of Black women by believing in and respecting their unique roles in society. Writer and activist Alice Walker spoke of womanist characteristics and qualities in her work, especially in Search of Our Mother's Gardens, Womanist Prose, written in 1983. What are some of the qualities and characteristics of womanism? Let's unpack them. Self-naming, self-definition, family-centeredness, family wholeness, role flexibility, adaptability, authenticity. The list continues with Black female sisterhood, struggling with Black men against oppression, male compatibility, recognition, ambition, nurturing, strengthening, respect for elders, mothering, and spirituality. The list continues. Now, Alice Walker believed that womanism has been around for a long time, even before the time of enslavement. She claims this ability to hold on, even in very simple ways, is work those Black women have done for a very long time. And I would like to share a quote with you that Alice Walker gives to us. She writes, "Our mothers and grandmothers, some of them moving to music not yet written, and they waited. They waited for a day when the unknown thing that was in them would be made known, but guessed somehow in their darkness that on the day of their revelation, they would be long dead. But that is not the end of the story. For all the young women, our mothers and grandmothers, ourselves, have not perished in the wilderness. And if we ask ourselves why, and search for and find the answer, we will know beyond all efforts to erase it from our minds just exactly who and of what we Black American women are." End of quote. I would be remiss in this conversation if I did not also mention the term Africana Womanism, which was created by Clenora Hudson Weems in the late 1980s. She highlights and shares knowledge about women who are a deciding factor in today's activism. Her definition serves as an ideology that includes American women and African American women, as well as women of African descent. It is based on African culture and Afrocentrism. It too focuses on the needs, experiences, struggles, and desires of Africana women of the African diaspora. She describes in her work the need for and practical methods that bring the Black family and community closer together in unity. These are only two of many labels that are circulating among us. As a people, we enjoy putting labels on others. And sometimes those labels get in the way of building relationships and caring for each other. So let us not get so focused on someone's label that we lose sight of the person and what they bring to the table of conversation. As a preacher, teacher, parent, grandparent, sister, aunt, writer, friend, I file under many labels. Labels are ways to identify who I am and the multiple roles I share with others in relationship and who identify with me. There is one label that I place above all others: woman of God, a believer created and designed in the image of God, Imago Dei. And before I close, I want to highlight three other women who were agents of change. Three women who were willing to let their brilliance shine forth and make a difference to change the lives of others. I recently read the book, The Three Mothers by Anna Malika Tubbs. It is a newly published book that shares an important message about three mothers named Alberta King, Louise Little, and Bertis Baldwin. They are the mothers of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and James Baldwin, respectively. I highly recommend this book because it is a reminder of how we often forget about the women who have played important roles in creating a legacy and making a difference. The legacy of these three mothers does, of course, include the historical impact that their sons have given to us. But it is even more than that. In each mother's way, in their own way, they shined their light on social justice, equality, and activism. They raised families that learned the importance of knowing Black history, having a spiritual foundation, being a voice for those who are oppressed and marginalized, and working within the community. Their work was done because they were the subjects of racial inequality, systemic racism, Jim Crow laws, white supremacy groups, lack of opportunity, and the civil rights movement. They fought actively for Black mothers and Black families within the Black community. They understood the need for a world where their children would be accepted and not judged by their skin color. Where do you think Dr. King got the idea for his I Have a Dream speech given in Washington, D.C. in 1963, when he said, and I quote, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today." End of quote. You know, he heard his mother pray those words and those thoughts and say those words to her children. She made it her business to raise her children with character on the wings of those prayers. Because of these 3 women and others, who they were and how they lived their lives, their legacy continues to bring light to social conditions and raise the consciousness of what is influencing humanity. The brilliance of their female spirit continues in today's activism. Whatever the title, whatever the label, whatever the circumstance, women have been extraordinary examples of being agents of change. In small local ways, in their backyards, in their workspaces, and with their spiritual presence in the faith community, as well as globally, their brilliance continues to shine. In their female spirit, they continue to contribute to today's activism. So women, tell your story. Continue to share the stories of other women with children and grandchildren and those around you. Educate our community about the people on whose shoulders we stand as we continue forward. So my answer to the question, have women been a deciding factor in faith and social activism throughout our country? Yes, absolutely. They have been a factor to reckon with in faith and social activism throughout this country and throughout this world. And may they continue to do so. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. I am putting into the chat the book, The 3 Mothers, so people can have easy access. Oh,
thank you.
You know, I continue to be humbled by how much there is to still learn. You know, there were stories that you shared that are new to me, including from the Bible, just a wonderful connecting. We'd like to open this to a conversation with Pastor Holly. And we have some folks still joining the room. If you could raise your hand, we'll try to do it that way. Everybody's done a beautiful job of staying muted. Thank you very much. Does anyone have a thought to share, a question, something that inspired or resonated, hit you in a different place? Everybody's absorbing, processing. Reverend Bell.
I know I see a hand, but I'm not sure if it's tilted right. I give up on these things sometimes. First of all, Pastor, it's good to see you. And
likewise,
good to be able to ferret through some of the comments that you had in terms of faith and activism. I was just maybe two questions. One is I'm just wondering how do you see faith and the role of faith impacting the activism, particularly of the many of the women that you have described, or some, or one or two, and what do you see the role of faith in the current struggle of humanity, of decency, of dignity? How do you see that from your own lens, from Elmira, from the places that you go? What can we do to get a better understanding so that we can be better doers of living out Dr. King's I Choose Love?
Thank you for that question, Reverend Bell. Where to begin? It's important, as I mentioned, to share our stories. And by that, I mean being able to share how you're still going, what you do and how you lead and live your life is because of your belief in a higher power, or your belief that you can make a difference in how you treat people and how you welcome people, by not being judgmental and being open to learning about a person sincerely and genuinely. As I mentioned, with using labels, sometimes just having a label serves as a wall, a barrier. And if we can get past that and include a sense of unity, a respect for difference, for diversity. And I think what has impacted me is the idea that I am not alone in this journey. And if we can support each other and pray for each other, share with each other, encourage each other, then I think we can continue to impact what's going on around us, using our voices and making sure that faith, hope, the message of hope stands out, because there's so many people who are hurting and in pain and have lost their sense of hope, that we are obligated to share what we know and bring the hope that that we have in our own personal lives and share with others.
Thank you.
Leslie, are you calling on people?
Excuse me?
I'm sorry, are you calling on people?
Oh, I'm trying. I'm scrolling, looking for hands up. Pat,
I was hands up, but it was my real hand.
Oh.
Thank you for hosting this. Reverend Strickland, thanks for presenting to us. I find one of the things I'm most troubled by lately is the hijacking of faith, in quotes, by those who are preaching hatred. So a neighbor up the street from me, I live in the Adirondacks, a neighbor has a huge Confederate flag and right next to it, a life-size angel. Everywhere we see it, the swastikas and the crosses combined. Mm-hmm. And so I think, I don't know, it's just of concern to me how it's been hijacked. Like the flag has been hijacked by people who don't seem to represent what we think this country was founded on. So I'm wondering what thoughts you have on how we counter the hijacking by presenting a different view of what having faith looks like.
Yeah, it saddens me that we see so much politics in our neighborhoods. The giant angel and the Confederate flag, and all of that. I struggle with that. And what keeps me looking forward and looking up is that the only way it's going to change is with those of us who believe in faith and who are following a lifestyle that is compassion and love and inclusive of others, is we just have to keep using our voices to teach the younger generations. In my doctoral work, the generations keep increasing of the unchurched. People who are considered nuns, NONES, because they're not affiliated with any spiritual connection or denomination. And I remember, if parents couldn't take their children to church and Sunday school, then there was a grandmother or an auntie or someone who would take them so that they didn't miss out on learning about Bible studies and how to pray and having a relationship with God. So even those things that were stable and consistent, like I would say back in the day, have been undermined and are not as strong as they used to be. So our children are really struggling when someone walks by this neighbor's house, a young person, and sees the angel and also the Confederate flag, which historically was not a good thing. They're confused, and a lot of times there aren't people around them in their sphere of influence who can explain and give them a better look at what's going on and how not everyone follows the kind of lifestyle that they should, or believes some of the things that that politics have put out there, and it doesn't get questioned or pushed back. So right now is just even more confusing times for our younger people as they try to grow and mature and become responsible adults. So as elders, we have an obligation, we have a responsibility to train up those who are coming behind us so that they know the truth and the real story.
I'm reflecting on something you said early in your talk that really struck about the importance of bringing definition into our conversation. And this is one of those moments that how do we bridge to our children and our neighbors? And what is it that you mean? Tell me what the definition of this is. Now, those of us driving by our neighbors don't have that opportunity very often, but it is an opening to understand what's meant by the Confederate flag next to the angel, and perhaps an opportunity for someone to stop and reflect. What do they mean by that? I thought that was really a wise piece that you brought there, Pastor Holly. Thank you.
Thank you. It's about relationships, relationship building, having the uncomfortable and the messy conversations, showing respect. Everyone is entitled to their opinion. You can agree to disagree, but I think having conversation and spending time over a cup of coffee and sharing what those symbols represent to that particular group or that person, and having a back and forth conversation where one person is not trying to persuade and beat someone over the head, but at least bringing awareness and knowledge, and in some cases maybe change because of the relationship and the willingness to have communication together. Of course, COVID doesn't make it any easier. We're social distancing, and a lot of social gathering is not happening. Potluck suppers at church and coffee hour and things like that, being out in the community. So it has been limiting, but there are still things that we can do on a smaller scale to start those conversations and to start understanding those relationships.
What do you look for? What would you like to see coming forth from our younger women today in engaging with the changes that are upon us? I'm just curious how you're seeing that, not just interpreted, but embodied by our younger women. I know that you work with a range of young people. Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, thank you for asking about that. Yes, I have a real passion for children, and the older I get, I realize that our girls and young women often are at a disadvantage in forming relationships and mentorships with women who can offer pearls of wisdom or experiences in their story times. So what I really would like to see more of is a reaching out to these young girls and children in general, young people in general, so that they have someone that will listen, that someone they can talk with and learn from. There used to be programs in the community centers, for example, where there was a big brother, big sister program, and then you were attached to, someone in the community, a leader in the community, and you would spend designated time doing things together, talking, sharing, and these were ways that children could get a look at what adulthood looks like, or what growing up and maturing and being responsible looks like. And unfortunately, with budgets and the sign of the times, a lot of those programs are no longer available. But I would really like to see more reaching out with people who are in positions where they have a platform, or they can encourage relationship building between youth and older people. I think we need more of that.
One of the young ladies that I've just fallen in love with is Amanda Gorman, a young poet who's surprised us with her brilliance and a wonderful voice that she's gaining all over this world, I would imagine. I see the struggle in your writings to have voice, and yet I see a lot of young people today, Black and white and brown and you name it, that are wrestling with common concerns of just survival, just making it in such a confusing world. You know, I mean, you've got hatred on every side. You've got CRT, you've got struggles, you've got shootings, you've got, you know, and this is a lot. This is a lot. And yet at the same time, we all risk annihilation from some type of nuclear war. What would you tell children today about the importance of the struggle and not hiding from it?
As a grandmother and you know, a mother, I think one of the things I tried and continue to try to share with children I come in contact with and my own family members is not to give up hope, to seek out what it is that you need to better understand who you are and what your history is and where you come from. So many times children of color feel invisible. They feel as though they're out there by themselves. They, you know, even with family support, because a lot of times family support is limited. You know, there's poverty, there's employment, unemployment, health concerns, all of that. And so they feel as though, children feel as though they have to figure it out on their own. And that can be very frustrating and overwhelming. And I think what I try to pass along is that you are not alone. There is no better time than right now to realize that it does take a village to raise a child. So whatever source of strength and light that you, Reverend Bell, can bring to the table, whatever source of strength and light. And as I'm saying this, I'm thinking of Amanda, because she reminds us to search for that light, to be that light. And I think that we all can share something, words of encouragement, direction, education, so that our children are not just wandering around wondering, is this where I find the answer? Is this where I find the answer? And, you know, with social media, we hear the nightmares of children who are searching for things and they end up searching in the wrong places. So it behooves us, any of us who have survived and have learned some life lessons, to share those, to make it an intentional way of reaching out to those who are coming along behind us, and encourage them and let them know they are not alone, that there are many of us who are willing to help them along the way, and sharing our stories as we go along the way. There is no silver bullet. There's no single answer. What works for one child may not work for another child. But if we're all trying to be intentional and assuming part of the responsibility of raising the village children, which would include all children, then I think we have a chance.
We have another roughly 5 minutes. I'd love to open the floor to anyone else who'd like. Pat, would you like to?
Yeah, I'm finding myself concerned about the distinction between the term feminism and womanism. Women historically have been divisive among themselves, oftentimes in movements, and the women's suffrage movement is a good example of that, as have some other movements. We're kind of good at being divided and conquered. So is there a term, my understanding is you were suggesting that feminism has pertained more to white women, sometimes to the exclusion of their sisters, and that womanism is a term that applies primarily to women of color. Is there a term that we should be moving towards that is more inclusive and embodies the female spirit, no matter what color?
Mm-hmm. That's what I was referring to when I spoke about labels. Who cares whether you're a feminist or a womanist? You're a woman, and there are things that you are empowered to do and to change. It's society that wants to put labels on everything and put people in a box. So I think just women. We don't need the other adjectives or labels. We are women. Hear us roar.
But there are so many women, the women who helped organize January 6th, the women who stand on the dais behind certain candidates. I feel like we need a rallying term, doesn't have to be a label, but a term for what we are trying to do and where we're trying to get to. And I don't know what that is, but I feel like we need to label in some way the effort, not the people, but the effort to get women on more of an equal footing in this country and in this world.
Can I just draw on a couple things that bring you together? The 2 points that brought you together was the whole idea of the patriarchy and gender. Those were the 2 things that unified you, but there was a type of sexism that a Black woman had to the exclusion of white women that differentiated the struggle for Black women. And historically, whether we're talking about Katie Stanton or we're talking about Angela Davis, there's a feeling of being left alone in the struggle. And what we find today is that your mobility, whether it's been organic or intentional, has been stronger when you have unified than it was when you were fighting your own individual battles. Mm-hmm. So you were much stronger together. And so you see in every institution today, you see a rise in women candidates in all types of disciplines. You see that that strength, it's been maybe what helped Saratoga win an election this year. To make real changes, or at least potentially make some real changes. How many other places are missing the opportunity, especially small communities, where the women in the rural communities are divided from the women in the urban settings, when you can make major change legislatively in every single county, because the red and the blue controlled by the men aren't ever going to get together. So you really have something to gain power with, to gain control over.
Pastor Holly, to build on what Reverend Bell is talking about is, I know I would welcome an ongoing conversation to talk about, there's bridging that I think women of color and white women are hungry to know how to do this. And there is just being women, and there's also an acknowledgement and awareness that there are gaps to be filled in, and how do we move forward together? And I'm going to plant a seed with you. I don't know where it will go, but that it would be an enriching thing to have a monthly conversation to come together and just talk about this. How do we strengthen this alliance and give room for, some of it is the lenses that we bring are so different, so that we change what we're doing.
I think that's a great idea. I welcome that opportunity to set something up on a regular basis where we can have conversation and share and try to bridge that gap.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have any last thoughts for us as we marinate on all of this richness and things, cultivating things a little differently, just enough?
Well, again, thank you so much for this time together. And there's so many layers, and I am excited that there are those who want to continue and have informal conversation in terms of growing and relationship building. So I think that's a wonderful thing, that has seed that has been planted. Thank you. People are hurting. People are in such a fragile state right now that, for example, the celebration today and the offerings and the events, the conversations that were made available today are such an important factor, because there's so much brokenness around us. Some of it historical trauma, collective trauma, as well as individual trauma. So any way that we can come together with the intent of healing and mending and building bridges, I think should become a priority.
I'd just like to, before we actually end this session, ask Leslie to talk about the next session that's coming up, and whether you want people to go out and come back, or if you want people to stay in, just what our plan is, so that as we move forward, we know what we're doing.
Thank you, tech goddess. I greatly appreciate you guarding the portal. Pastor Holly, thank you so very much for sharing and being here with us. And the wonders of Zoom, that we can cross the miles, is extraordinary. We will do our very best to keep this group of participants up to speed if we are able to get something rolling soon. Thank you for setting the platform. Our next community conversation starts in about 7 minutes. So we're going to pop out of here because it's a different Zoom link. I'm not sure we can stay in this room and have it acknowledged. So the Kenyan scholar, Reverend Dr. Ken Clark, is joining us. And he's talking about Malcolm, as in Malcolm X, and Martin Luther King, and this shift that's underway as we take up moving from civil rights focus to human rights focus. It's going to be also really enlivening. Thank you. So With that, good night, blessings. Maybe I'll see you in the next Zoom room. Pastor Holly will be in touch. And check out the website. We've got more programming for the next 2 days, including a wonderful community interface celebration on Monday. Good night, all. Much love.
Good night.